Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Down the Tea Tennis podcast, where this is probably the most somber episode we've done yet. I mean, I think we knew that eventually we would have to record this, but we really didn't want to or accept that it might happen. Obviously, I'm referencing the retirement of Roger Federer from professional tennis. We also will be rounding up in this podcast more of Serena's career as well. We've talked about her before and her retirement at the US Open, and we said that we'd come back and look more into her career. And with two legends synonymous with tennis retiring pretty much at once within a few weeks of each other, it's just made sense to roll them both into one. But we will start actually with some of the action, the Laver Cup, where obviously Roger Federer played pro tennis for the last time, and maybe a little bit on the Davis Cup group stages that took place about a fortnight ago now. So starting with the Laver Cup, Ewan, Team World taking the title this year for the first time. How much did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I really did enjoy it. I think it was one of the more enjoyable Laver Cups we've had for me. Really, last year was the one I didn't catch too much of, and I think that was the only one you'd probably say that's been a disappointment so far. Every year, I mean, I think it's always been great entertainment, but this year really was up there in terms of the storylines. We're going to come on to with Federer, but with all of the big four being there. But then with Team World taking the first title, that there had been questions given the one-sided scoreline last year of it being two one-sided event, the teams being lopsided. So I think in a way it was a positive for the event that Team World had broke the duck here, that it didn't go on too much longer, and they've got their first title at the fifth time of asking. So yeah, for a number of reasons, I thought it was a thoroughly entertaining event with the stories, the level of tennis.
And it is important, like you said. Team World took the title for the first time, especially after last year where it was just a complete rollover for Team Europe. I remember last year's Laver Cup, I caught a little bit of it, but not the whole thing. Felt very, very underwhelming. There wasn't much play at all on the final day because it was all dead rubbers. And I remember saying, maybe we may need to switch up the format, switch up the teams or something rather than Team Europe versus Team World because it's just too one-sided for Team Europe. I think also maybe the players let it down last season as well. And I hate to say this because it comes across with so much disrespect to Medvedev, Tsitsipas, Alexander Zverev, who were the three top players for Team Europe, the three top players at the event, and there were 2, 3, and 4 in the world at the time. But, the Laver Cup, it started out with a team with Nadal and Federer on it in 2017, and we got to see Nadal and Federer play doubles on the same team, and it was just crazy. It was something new and fresh. And I just think the absence of the big three in 2021 as well as the domination for Team Europe, it just felt a bit underwhelming. But this year the teams, it looks like they had the same problems as last year. You had Team Europe that had 4 top 10 players, 4 current top 10 players in there, versus Team World, whose highest ranked player was Taylor Fritz at number 12. And, just the fact that Europeans make up a lot of the top ranks. But, there's a lot of informed players on Team World as well. You look at Frances Tiafoe, you look at the danger that Jack Sock possesses in the doubles, and he was so crucial for that win. It turned out a really good event. So with that in mind, Europe versus the world, do you see it working? Are we settled on this format now?
Yeah, I think so. And I did share the thoughts you said you had after the 2021 edition with, 14-1 scoreline. It really was, couldn't get more one-sided. But you mentioned Jack Sock, and who didn't actually play in 2021. I think he's been such a huge player for Team World. I think we've seen the value of him that all the years he has played, they have been a lot more competitive. And obviously this year he played a huge part helping them win 2 of the 3 doubles matches. So we saw how much they probably missed him last year. So yeah, I think the format definitely, from what we've seen this year, really, and besides the one anomaly, you could say, I think it does work. And now that we've seen what Team World produced this year, that they've got some more good young players coming up who are going to improve. Yeah, you'd still say the strength and depth on the European side is is superior, but we've seen them pull it off this year. So I'm very much looking forward to see how it continues to go moving forward.
And like you say, it has been competitive in the past, like 2017, 2018, 2019, they were all fairly close at least, with the Europe versus the World format. And once again, with the Team World having the same issues of not many players inside the top 10. So like you say, it was just last year. Last year was so overwhelming in Team Europe's favour. It called it into question, but we have seen most years it's been competitive. And this year, Team World have took the title for the first time. And, I was quite pleased to see it, as much as I would have preferred a Europe victory, especially with a fairy tale ending. I was actually, quite happy actually to see Team World take the title. The Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal doubles match, I think we should get onto that, although we will be talking more about Federer later. But that match, did it live up to your expectations?
Yeah, I think in terms of a spectacle, it definitely did, and the entertainment it brought, the emotions that came with it. Then obviously after it, yeah, it definitely did deliver. I think in terms of the level of tennis, it was decent. It wasn't perfect, but I mean that's not what you wouldn't have expected it to be, given Federer hadn't played for well over a year and had obviously been coming back from another surgery. But I think given that he did play a good match, really, yeah, in the circumstances. I think he did well, really, as well as he could have done. Nadal, I think as well, it was really difficult for him to handle that occasion, knowing he was playing alongside his great friend and rival in what was his last match, and I think he did struggle with it a little bit, but still, they still came within a point of winning and fought their way to match point against a pretty impressive double pair. And obviously, Jack Sock, we've talked about, we know how great a doubles player he is, really, as good as any in the world. I think when he's at his best on the doubles court, and Tiafoe I thought was impressive, well, in the event in general, but also on the doubles court. We haven't seen as much of him. He definitely has a lot of the tools to succeed there. So yeah, up against a strong team, I thought they really did put in a great showing, Nadal and Federer, in what was Federer's send off. And yeah, of course, it would have been nice for them to come away with the win, but I don't think the result was. It wasn't the be all and end all. It was the performance and the fact that they got to take the court one last time and be part of such a competitive match. The last time, I mean, on Federer's side, obviously, yeah, it was I think a near perfect ending. I think that Federer could have hoped for, given that he wasn't going to be able to make, I think, the full comeback he was hoping for, given the injuries. This was, I think, the next best thing really you could have hoped for, outside of a full season, to do it alongside Nadal. Yeah, it was a special end.
Yeah, he helped create. So I'm sure that he'd have quite liked. Well, I know that he quite liked the send off, and the way he got to do it, he'd have preferred to do. He'd preferred to make a full comeback, I'm sure. But I'm sure, like I say, he's content with the way it's ended. Just a couple more points, I think, before we get on to Federer. One more on the Laver Cup. Novak Djokovic produced an extremely high level in singles against Frances Tiafoe, then lost to Felix Auger-Aliassime, suffering with what he says may have been a wrist injury. Firstly, in an incredible level against Tiafoe, and I think that was maybe a warning to the rest of the ATP tour that, if you can get to tournaments, he's a factor. But how much credit goes to Auger-Aliassime in that win as well, that he got against Djokovic? To what extent did injury play a part, or was it just FAA was that good as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he deserves all the credit, really. It was an outstanding performance from Auger-Aliassime. I thought probably the biggest win of his career. I know, people can debate, how the Laver Cup ranks compared to some other events, but I think, whether you consider it an exhibition or not, I mean, it is an official ATP event now, and I mean, I think you saw the quality of the tennis. The players are not giving anything less than 100%, and so I don't think it's any different really to what you'd see really at other events. So I thought it was an outstanding performance from him, really in all aspects of his games. I mean, particularly the serve was incredible. I mean, to see him against the greatest returner of all time, who at times was had no answer to the Auger-Aliassime first serve, but it was just an outstanding display. Of course, Djokovic, yeah, I think he was a bit affected. You could see maybe with his serving and the forehand wasn't quite at his best, but he did fight. He had a lead in the first set, came back in the second set, but he just didn't quite have enough to live with Felix on that day in what was I think a huge win for him, and then for him to follow it up after winning a crucial doubles tie to kick off day 3. It was a big day for the auger-aliassime, and another great performance in a team competition, which we've seen this year after he beat Alcaraz in the Davis Cup the week before, and also led Canada to the ATP Cup at the start of the season. So he has really thrived on the team stage in 2022. I think it's just now a case for him to translate that more onto the tour, where we have seen some great results, but not quite so much through the middle part of the season. So a big positive for him for sure. And just on the big four in general, we touched on it. It was just fantastic to see them all, as teammates. With this being Federer's final event, to see them on the bench, Murray there as well, to have all 4 of those guys competing for Team Europe. It was fantastic to see that for the first time, and to see them, giving each other encouragement and coaching really during the matches. Yeah, it is the special thing about the Laver Cup, which you don't see at any other event. It's brilliant to see that.
Yeah, and I think we'll wrap up on the Laver Cup there. Nice note to end it on, just the unique way that it brings the whole team bench together, and you get to see these top pros giving advice to each other, making little notes, or just bringing each other water, as it turned out with Federer to Djokovic. But before we leave the team tennis, and I realise we have got a lot to sum up here with both Roger and Serena, but before we leave the team tennis, I think we will touch on the Davis Cup. A bit of a change in format this year, not in terms of like the way the matches are set up, but the tournament as a whole, where the group stage is played separately to the finals. It's a nice in between for me. As much as I love the old Davis Cup format, maybe it's not sustainable on the tour the way it is at the moment. But the shortened over a week format didn't really feel like the World Cup of tennis that I'd known before at all. Whereas this, at least, it creates some kind of tension, some kind of suspense for the group stage of the finals being separate to the finals of the finals. I don't know. I quite liked it. What did you think?
Yeah, I've quite enjoyed this format so far. Obviously, we've had kind of the first part of it with that group stage, and then we're gonna see the finals again later in the year. But I agree. I do think it was definitely worth trying it. Splitting the two, as you mentioned last year, it was quite a lot of tennis to fit it all into one, and with it all being right at the end of the season as well, following the ATP finals, it did feel like quite a lot crammed in. So I think having the group stage now, and kind of then, as you say, having that suspense of coming back for the finals later, it is a nice way of splitting it. And I thought the group stage was good. I didn't see a great deal of it, but what I did see was a good level of tennis and an entertaining event, which we have seen at times with the new Davis Cup. It's been maybe a bit of a mix, with them still trying to find that right format, but it looks like this is definitely one worth persisting with, and very much looking forward to the finals later in the year.
What I didn't enjoy about this year's Davis Cup was Great Britain's performance. I think we had a little chat before, saying how impressed we were with the team. It's got good doubles players in there, Joe Salisbury, and we know how good Andy's been in the doubles. In fact, I thought he played quite well in the doubles, if anything. And I hate to say this, I thought Salisbury let the team. I thought Andy Murray performed just as you'd expect him to be in doubles, but Joe Salisbury didn't play like the world number one. Not that it was bad, he just didn't play like the world number one. But then, the singles as well, it's like Cam Norrie can compete with anyone. Dan Evans is a great number 2. So I thought we had a chance, but it wasn't to be this year. Maybe next year, because I do think we've got a decent team developing when you look at Jack Draper as well to come into the mix. Just that mix of quality, maybe not one outstanding superstar, but that mix of quality that can all win matches. Like I say, it didn't happen this year. But we'll wrap up the Davis Cup there, and we'll wrap up the tennis action there, and we'll focus on the topics that we really don't want to have to be talking about, but it's here. The retirement of of Roger Federer. It doesn't actually feel real to me yet, but I won't see Roger Federer play pro singles tennis again. Maybe on the Champions Tour, but obviously that's not the same. I don't know, you and has it sunk in for you yet?
I don't think it has really, because as we were just discussing before we started, I mean, it did come as a bit of a surprise to me, really, the announcement that this was going to be his final event. Obviously, not long prior to it starting, I did think that we would see a little bit more of Federer. Not too much, but I thought we would probably see his comeback continue in the next year, and we'd probably see him at Wimbledon again, at Basel certainly this year, and then maybe next year, along with a few other events. I'm sure he would have loved to play for the final time, but yeah, unfortunately, it wasn't to be because of his recovery from the third knee surgery just not quite going as he would have liked, and understandably didn't want to push it too hard and risk another setback. So yeah, we have arrived at the end, unfortunately, and it is tough to accept it, but at the same time, at the age of 41 now, I mean, has had an incredible career. The longevity he's shown was really he has shown and did show was really unmatched, I think, in the men's game, in tennis in general. So yeah, of course, sad. It's gonna be very difficult to move on from Federer. I don't think anyone who's a tennis fan was ready to let go. But yeah, it was a sad moment for the tennis world. But as we touched on, a fitting end at the Laver Cup with the scenes we saw, the appreciation he got from the crowd, and his rivals, some of his great friends and rivals there alongside him. And I think you saw the emotions they showed, particularly Nadal. I think just shows what Federer meant to tennis, and particularly this era, which I think many would agree is the greatest era in tennis history. To have his rivals there and really see what he meant to them, just shows how incredible a player and a person he is.
And just taking more of his outstanding career. I mean, he doesn't lead on a lot of the pure numbers anymore, but I mean, Roger Federer between maybe 2003, you'd say, to 2008, 9, maybe. I don't know where he dropped, because obviously he had great runs later in his career as well. His resurgence in 2017 was incredible. We all thought we'd seen the last of him at the top level. Then he came through with the Australian Open, Wimbledon, defended his Australian Open the next year. But basically that year where he was on top, he was pretty much unbeatable almost everywhere except the French Open, it turned out. Just how high a level of tennis was that? Is it the best level of tennis we've ever seen, or is still debate to be had there? Because people say with Federer it's not all about the winning, although he did a hell of a lot of it. It was also the way that he played, and it's hard to actually describe. It's hard to put it into words. It's something hard to quantify, but there is just something about him, isn't there?
There is, and I think you're absolutely right. It is a combination of the results he had and the numbers, which they don't always do it true justice with any player. And I think that is the case with Federer, given, like you say, that the style of play is so unique. So particularly in the modern game, there just aren't many like him. They're none like him at the top level. There haven't been for a long time. So it's special to watch. But a lot of the records, they're still, even if he isn't number one in the categories, he's in the top 2 or 3. I mean, he's right up there, really. As far as all-time greats go, he is right up there. And you said, where does the level of his prime rank? I think it's got to be right up there. Obviously, I didn't witness that era, live, unfortunately, sort of the prime Federer years, but from my time watching tennis, has been more the last decade, which has been more towards the end of Federer's career, where he's still produced an incredible level, particularly, as you said, in that 2017 season, which was an incredible resurgence. But I think from matches I've had the chance to watch back in full or in highlights, in that mid 2000s period, I think it is up there with the highest levels we've seen in tennis, and I think you'd put it right up there with also from Nadal in the late 2000s to the early 2010s. You'd probably say 2010 being Nadal's peak, and also Djokovic kind of from the early 2010s to 2015, 16. I think you could argue all of the big three really in those sort of 4 or 5 year periods they had in their prime were, you know, the three highest levels of tennis we've seen in history, given that I think most agree that they're the three greatest of all time. And yeah, it is hard for me to say whether Federer's is higher, given I didn't witness it live, but I think from what I have seen from him and just what I've seen from his career as a whole, is there's no doubt he's still very much in the conversation as one of the greatest of all time, and for me is in the top three, definitely.
I think, like you say, it's the GOAT debate for me. It's something that sometimes I engage in it, but sometimes I try and skirt around the topic, because at the end of the day, the three of them, they're just all levels above, and that's no disrespect to people like, I mean, Bjorn Borg, who my dad says is part of the GOAT debate. You know, I can understand this point, but I just don't see him as part of the debate when you've got these three that put together, you know, the longevity and just the pure output that we've had in terms of titles. And especially in this era of tennis, the way the game's developed, I just don't think the debate's there. And you know, there's Sampras. I don't want to disrespect them, but these three are miles above. And Roger Federer was the first of them to emerge, and he was the first to really start that. You know, it was the first that we looked at and thought, wow, he could be the best of all time, certainly. You know, like you say, we missed a lot of it in our lifetime. I did watch tennis when you know, in that period, but I can't claim to have been taking it in and understanding it. But that's another reason why this has got me so sort of emotional, and more emotional than I've been for any sports person's retirement, and that includes some of my football heroes. You know, some of the very first Leeds United team that I remember getting into. Those retirements hit me hard, but this has hit me the hardest, because as long as I've known tennis, I've known Roger Federer, and you know, it felt like he'd always be there in a way. He's just synonymous with the sport, even now, even with Djokovic, even with Nadal. If you think of tennis, he's usually, for most people, the first name that comes to mind. And you know, to accept it, he's you know, I won't see him compete at Wimbledon again. It's difficult. It just it feels like it doesn't feel real still. And you know, I just wish there could be some kind of knee transplant. He could have my knee, because I'd rather retire from tennis myself and never watch Roger Federer play singles again.
Absolutely.
I've run out of things to say.
No, there is. Yeah, we could go on for hours. I mean, that's, you know, how incredible he has been to the sport, and you know, he'll continue to be. I'm sure he'll continue to be involved, and that, you know, his career will never die. I mean, people will obviously continue to talk about, you know, the great matches he's played. Just what he produced on the court is unique. But you're absolutely right. It is tough to move on from it. But I should probably mention that the first Grand Slam final, you know, I didn't really watch in full, was the 2009 Wimbledon final, where Federer won an epic 5-setter against Andy Roddick. So yeah, I mean, one of the first matches I watched, really, because that was kind of the first tournament I properly watched, and so it was a fantastic first slam final to witness, really, when I was really getting into tennis. And I mean, just an incredible win he pulled off there, Federer, against an inspired Andy Roddick. Just a fantastic match. That was one I've always remembered, and got kind of it's got a sort of a special place for me as one of the great matches, given that it was, you know, one of the first matches that I watched, and that was the one which took him past Pete Sampras, onto what was then a record of 15 Grand Slam titles, surpassing Sampras's 14, which was a record that many thought would stand for a long time. And then Federer came along and broke it, I think 7 years after Sampras set that in 2002, which was well ahead of anything that had been done before. So to think that, then we've had another 2 players come, and all 3 of them have reached 20 at least. It is incredible, and as you say, it is significant that Federer was the first one out of the big 3, the big 4, in this incredible era. And in a way, as Federer did say, he thought it was fitting that he would kind of be the first one to retire. But I don't think many expected him to play until the age of 41. So it is just a testament to the incredible longevity he had. A 24-year career. There's not many that are gonna be able to match that. Maybe we'll see it from Nadal and Djokovic as well. But 1,251 match wins he achieved. I mean, 103 ATP titles. I think these are the stats that really show just the longevity. It's incredible. Only Jimmy Connors, who won more ATP singles titles, and another player who played it, who just seemed to go on forever. So the numbers, they are still incredible, even though in some areas he has been matched or surpassed by Nadal and Djokovic. He's still right up there in so many areas. And a really special one, I think, is 310 weeks at world number 1 overall, which is second only to Djokovic, but a record of 237 consecutive weeks as world number 1, which, I mean, is something that might never be broken. I think that's just a testament to how dominant he was in that mid-2000s period that we talked about, and particularly the 2006 season, which I think would stand out as the very best of his career, where he won 12 singles titles and reached the finals at 16 of the 17 tournaments he entered that year. I mean, just a staggering level of dominance. It's hard to actually fathom that when you just read in that 92 wins to 5 losses, reaching all 4 of the major finals, winning 3 and 4 Masters 1000 titles and the ATP finals in that season. I mean, I think when we talk about the greatest seasons in tennis history, that's got to be right up there again with the best probably that we saw from Djokovic and Nadal.
And I think this brings me back to a point that I was trying to make, and then I got sidetracked because it is so hard to focus my thoughts on this. And this is getting into a bit of a GOAT debate topic, and I hate myself for it because we shouldn't be here for this, but I do think it is a significant mitigating factor that we've got to bring into the GOAT debate when people say, it's been surpassed now. Yeah, okay, he had years without Nadal and Djokovic, but he's been past his prime pretty much. He's had comebacks 2017, as we've mentioned, but he's had years where he's had to step away from the tour to make recoveries, where he's had little drops in form, as you'd expect at his age. While Nadal and while Djokovic have been towards their primes, and I think that's allowed them to pick up some titles where Federer may have been a factor. So I think, I think when people say, well, he picked up so many without Nadal and Djokovic, I think Nadal and Djokovic have, although Federer's technically been an active player, picked up many beyond Federer's prime and when he's not been there. And I think that, like I say, it's an important mitigating factor. It doesn't say, I'm not nailing my colours to the mast here, because, to be honest, my opinion on who's the best out of the 3 of them changes every week. For a lot of this year, I've been Nadal, but now I'm starting to accept it might be Djokovic again. But also, I think because of the way this retirement has hit me, and, because I've been watching a lot of old clips of Federer and just the elegance and the beauty he plays with, as well as the ruthlessness and the clinicalness and the incredible level, I'm starting to think maybe Federer is actually part of this debate again, even though he has been surpassed on a lot of the important statistics. I suppose we should maybe talk about some iconic matches. I think that'd be a nice little topic, but there's so many to choose from. So straight away, Ewan, where does your mind go?
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many, but there's 2 which really would spring straight to mind, barring the one I just mentioned, the 2009 Wimbledon final, which I think deserves it's got to be up there. But I would go with the year prior, the 2008 Wimbledon final, which obviously Federer did lose in 5 sets to Rafael Nadal. But I think in many people's eyes, the greatest match of all time, certainly right up there. And for me, again, not one that I watched live, unfortunately, but yeah, that I've watched back many times, and just an absolutely incredible match from both. I mean, it did have everything really in terms of Federer being 2 sets to love down, coming back, saving match points, winning 2 tiebreak sets to take it to a fifth, and ultimately coming up just short. But I mean, I think, yeah, it's just an incredible showcase of the talent of both those players, and the defining match. Well, one of the defining matches in what was, without doubt, one of the greatest rivalries in tennis history, and the other one would. Well, I said I named 2. Actually, I'm gonna have to name 3 now. That I've thought of another one. I was gonna say that because I've got to give Roger one which he won. I mean, there's 2 big ones which he lost, you'd say, and the other one would be the 2019 Wimbledon final against Djokovic, which is an incredible match, an extremely painful one from a Federer point of view, probably, and at the completely other end of the scale for Djokovic. But again, what Federer brought to the court in that match at that age, at that stage of his career, was still an incredible performance. Obviously, a very, probably the most difficult loss of his career. That's tough to say. I mean, he has had a few as many incredible victories as he's had, but still an outstanding match. But yeah, to give the one that he won, another 5-set, the 2017 Australian Open final. We did talk about that season, how incredible it was, and it started with that tournament, with that final, coming from 3-1 down, I think, in the final set to beat Nadal there. That was a huge win for Federer, which really kicked off that resurgence. Went on to win 2 more slams after that to take him to 20 in the end. So I mean, that was a huge win for Federer in a rivalry which, Nadal had dominated early on, but in the latter years, Federer really did come back at it. I think winning, well, pulling it back to, I think, 16-24 overall, with Nadal in the lead. But yeah, just those 3 are the ones which probably stand out for me as well, all-time great matches, but particularly ones involving Federer.
And I think it's funny that you mentioned about 2019 final, actually, because I kind of blame myself for the loss there, although there is also the woman in the crowd with the finger up as well, like on the match points. But I started talking to my dad about how when he was 15 up, I started talking to my dad about how incredible it was at 38 years old, about to take his 21st slam title, and obviously it didn't happen. So yeah, a bit of blame on me there. Also the woman in the crowd. But I think you make an important point on it, and it was actually a fresh perspective that I saw the other week in discussion threads online as well, that we don't give him enough credit maybe for being there at that age against Djokovic. Young 30s at the time, probably. Djokovic 32 maybe, I don't know. Roger Federer obviously 38. Yeah, it's 6 years, but it's a big 6 years from 32 to 38. Just to have been there, just to have pushed Djokovic that far. And obviously, yes, he did have a chance to win it. He had big chances to win it, 2 points on his own serve. One of the match point saves. I mean, both of them were very good, but one of them was so good that it was like, Federer could have played that point any way he wanted. He wouldn't have won it. So, we don't give him, like I say, we don't give him enough credit for even being there in the first place. To have pushed Djokovic, the very best in the world, definitely at that time, so far to 5 sets, and to have performed so well in that 5th set as well. Obviously, he ultimately lost it, but it should have been Djokovic with loads left in the tank. But I mean, they both had enough left in the tank, it turned out, and Djokovic just edged it in the end. I think for another, it's not really an iconic match, but it's an iconic match to me that I'd like to highlight. 2012 Wimbledon. Obviously, I was always a massive Murray fan. I wanted to see the Brit do well. Murray's first Wimbledon final, the whole country behind him, and he takes the first set, and we're starting to get excited. But then Federer just turns up and plays an extremely high level of tennis for the next 3 sets, and it's maybe not the most iconic Federer Wimbledon final. But looking back on it, I'm like, Federer played extremely well. I don't think Murray. I think Murray, the level he was at that day, would have beaten a lot of players, but not Federer on grass. And it is significant for me because by the end of the match, I didn't hold it against Federer that he'd beaten Murray. If anything, I just held my hands up, and I think a lot of the crowd in centre court that day, yeah, they were rooting for Murray, but they just couldn't begrudge Federer at all. You know, obviously he's an extremely popular figure with the Wimbledon crowd. The one person that he can play against probably and not have the crowd behind him is Andy Murray. But by the end of the final, the crowd was probably as much behind Federer as the war Murray, and that probably is testament to Federer's legacy, especially at Wimbledon, but just in tennis in general.
Absolutely, yeah, that was another great match. I mean, among many I think one thing that stands out is obviously there've been some epic matches, but particularly during his prime, there was so many dominant wins, which I think is one just aspect to his greatness, how much he did dominate really all his competitors in that early part of his career in the mid 2000s. And but yeah, another one I think I would have to mention would be the 2009 French Open. Not necessarily the final, which I mean he did win extremely impressively in straight sets over Robin Soderling, but to complete the career Grand Slam there was a huge achievement from finally adding the French Open after having won the other three slams, all far several years earlier. To actually do that after losing three finals in a row and 4 years in a row to Nadal, that was a huge moment for Federer, and one which definitely stands out.
So, as I kind of referenced earlier, there's something different about Federer in terms of the elegance of the way that he plays, if you want to call it that. He's a little bit different, maybe, to Nadal and Djokovic, and they've all got their own styles of play. You know, Nadal with the heavy top spin, the extreme heavy top spin. Djokovic with this almost aggressive defense where he can turn defensive positions into attacking positions and just hammer you from the baseline. If you had to sum up Federer's style of play, if you can sum up Federer's style of play, how would you do that? How would you summarize it?
Yeah, well, it is a difficult one, but the best way I would try and describe him would be an all-court player, but an extremely complete, aggressive player would be how I'd describe him, but a complete player in general, because he still has incredible defensive skills. But I think the fact he's won, more than 10 titles on all three of the different surfaces just shows just how complete he is, even though I would consider him more of an aggressive, fast court player. He still had incredible success on clay, on slower hard courts. And I think, when you look at his game, there aren't really any weaknesses there, which, I mean, any big weaknesses, which you'd say for all of the big three, obviously. But but there's so many huge strengths as well, which you'd say in the first serve, which I would say is one of the greatest of all time. Definitely in terms of accuracy, you could say maybe the greatest, just how consistent he is with hitting his spots with that, but at a good speed as well. The forehand, I think, is still up there as one of the all-time great shots, one of the great forehands, definitely. But particularly I've seen many people say in that period of his prime was just pretty much an untouchable shot, and still incredible in the last stage of his career. But I mean, they're the two which, really were the fundamentals of his game and won him so many points and matches alone. But as well as that, he still had, I think, one of the great single-handed topspin backhands, maybe the greatest backhand slice of all time, certainly up there. And I think certainly of this year was probably the best volley, on the men's tour in singles. Fantastic at the net, not just the volleys, the touch, the drop shots. I mean, one of the best players in that area as well, I would say. So you look at how many different tools he has at his disposal, and that's a difficult thing to handle for a lot of players. We've seen some other players who you could say that they've kind of got all the shots, or they've got all areas of their game are strong. They've got so many tools, but a lot of players do find it difficult to put that together. And I think that's maybe one of the most impressive things about Federer, is that he pretty much can do everything extremely well, particularly the offensive tools, but he has managed to put it together so perfectly. And I guess that goes to the mental side of the game, that he knows how to use them. The shot selection is incredible. He knows when to play from the baseline, when to come forward, when to use the drop shot or the slice. So yeah, I mean, an incredible competitor, the mental strength, but also just that tennis brain, tennis IQ, as it'll be called, is it's got to be right up there. And it's probably even more important when you've got such a complete game. But also, as I touched on as well, I would say, the complete offensive player, still an incredible mover around the courts. So often rightly said how easy he makes it look, how he looks like he glides across the court, and that is true. Obviously, with the incredible amount of work he's put on off the court to be able to do that. But yeah, I mean, when you compare him with, obviously, when you look at the three, it's usually Nadal and Djokovic. You talk about the defensive skills and the movement, and rightly so, because they're probably the two greatest ever in those departments. But Federer still is probably one of the great defenders and one of the great movers around the court. So yeah, just I've done my best to kind of sum it up, but basically he's incredible at everything, but particularly the offensive side of the game is what I would say.
And you've used pretty much the expression that I wanted to use, and it's almost overused, but I think it's the only way to almost describe the indescribable of Federer's style of play. And it is that when it's working, when he's at his best, he makes it look easy. It makes the impossible, it makes the difficult look incredibly easy. Anyone who's stepped on a tennis court at any level and actually tried to play the game knows just how immensely difficult it is. You think, oh, it's just chasing a ball and hitting it back over net, and then you quickly find out it's so much harder than that at every level of the game. Even when you're just starting against fellow beginners, it's so much harder than you imagine. And it is just the way he floats around the court, like say, glides around the court. There's, once again, we're trying to, assign words to something that's, I don't think words have been created for here because Federer and Djokovic Nadal and Djokovic move ridiculously well, but there's something about the way Federer moves, and it's hard to, I know that's so vague, that's just different, that's just graceful and beautiful. And I think I'm struggling here, and the best thing I can do is basically, I might put a link in the description to this on the YouTube version of a podcast. There's essentially like a 5,000 word essay written in the New York Times by David Foster Wallace called Roger Federer as a Religious Experience. And it goes against all of the things me and you were taught about journalism, modern online journalism, that you've got to be succinct and to the point, and people don't want to read long essays. They want nice, quick, sharp reads. It is an absolute word sandwich, but that's almost what it takes to describe Roger Federer at his very best, and it's one of the most incredible pieces of sports journalism I've read in the last few weeks. It's actually from 2006 is the article, but I only came across it, obviously, with the circumstances. So I would recommend everyone to go and read it. And like I say, I might put a link in the description of the YouTube version, and if we can, on Spotify as well. So we'll move on from that extremely difficult task, and I think bring it to the end of a section on Federer, and we'll end with the end of his career. We talked about the Laver Cup and the way he went out. We know that him and Rafael Nadal have built up kind of a friendship over the years. A friendship has blossomed from the rivalry. I know that Djokovic as well, it seems like a friendship may have developed. Both of them, especially Rafa, but both of them got really emotional. Seeing Federer bow out of professional tennis. I mean, how much did it hit you, those scenes of Rafael Nadal in floods of tears? And what does that almost say about Federer, the fact that his greatest rival is in there, inconsolable at the fact that he's retiring from the sport?
Yeah, absolutely. It was emotional, I think, for the tennis world. I mean, it really was. And just to witness that. And yeah, I think that there's the emotional scenes, particularly as you mentioned from Nadal and even Djokovic, I think it just showed what Federer has meant to tennis and by what it's meant to his rivals. His competitors. He's been against. They've been going against each other to win the biggest titles, but when it's come to the time that he's exiting the sport, and that's hit them really hard. And yeah, I mean, we know Nadal and Federer, they've always had a good relationship. It's always been quite a respectful relationship, but it was still one of the fiercest tennis rivalries. So to see Nadal, I mean, in tears like that, I mean, more emotional than I've ever seen Nadal. It really was pretty remarkable to witness, and showed just how high regard he holds Federer, and probably the impact he knows that Federer has had on his career, and I think it's the case for Djokovic as well. But with Federer going first, being that bit older and hitting the heights that he did for so long, it really it just really set the bar for Nadal and Djokovic, and allowed them to give them something to chase after. To chase after who was then the greatest player of all time, and then these two that followed have tried to also become that. And we've had this incredible era, which was started by Federer. So yeah, to see those two, and also Murray, who've been such a huge part of this. It was fantastic to have them there in those moments after the final match of Federer's career. It couldn't really have been better in that sense, to see just what he's meant to the sport and this fantastic era that I've had the pleasure of following for at least the last 10 years or so. So yeah, just fantastic to see. And I think it does just, even with Djokovic, with Djokovic and Federer, the rivalry did maybe have a bit more of an edge in the early stages. They didn't always get along so well, but to see that now they do seem to be friendly, that they get on pretty well. It is nice to see that. And a fantastic end in that sense.
Yeah. I think part of me is, and another reason that, like I say, it's hit me so hard as this retirement, and I am quite emotional about it. I genuinely am quite emotional about it, and I got very emotional the other night, actually. Seeing Rafa Nadal in floods of tears, seeing Djokovic tearing up, I think not only as a little part of them sort of died with Federer, it was such a big part of the careers, and there'll never be another iconic match between them, either of them and Federer. I think also a part of their emotion is to realise that Federer retiring marks almost a reminder that the kind of on borrowed time the pair of them, and that's difficult to say with the incredible tennis of both produced. I mean, we've both got a slam this season. Rafa has two, the Australian and the French. Djokovic took Wimbledon. Yeah, okay, there should be no signs of them retiring, but we've seen maybe a little bit more frailty to Djokovic, even when he has played. Obviously, he's missed a lot of tennis for other reasons, but we've seen a couple more injury issues this season as well than we have done from the past. He's the player whose body has seemed to hold up the most out of the... Well, you can't really say that about Federer because he's a few years older. But considering he's a very similar age to Nadal, Nadal's historically had a lot more injury issues. And with Nadal, it's kind of like, yeah, he's had a great season, but in the end, fitness issues towards the end of the season have played a big part yet again. They've already gone longer than all of them have gone longer than they should have ever been expected to anyway. And even though they're still producing a high level of tennis, they are on borrowed time. And I think they realise that, and Federer is retiring is another reminder to them that they're not going to go on forever, and they're going to have this moment soon. And I'd like to say I'm fairly neutral on the big three. I don't think I make any secret that Djokovic is my least favourite, but I don't dislike him. I love the guy, actually. I love the way he plays tennis. He's just my least favourite out of them. But when Djokovic goes, and Djokovic I think will be the last to go, I mean, I don't know, that might even hit me even more than Federer, because it is like that is tennis as far as I know. On the men's side, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, that is tennis, and when all three of them have gone, that's it's hard to imagine tennis without it. So I don't know if you've got, I think that's pretty much everything I've got inside that I've laid out in this podcast now, but I don't know if you've got any final thoughts that you'd like to touch upon.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, there's so much you can go into with the statistics and the records, which we've done a lot of, and the great matches. And yeah, just bringing it sort of, I guess, back to you touched on a little bit earlier with the GOAT debate. That it is a difficult one. I mean, there's still, I think, a way to go before I would make a definitive sort of claim on it. Given what you've said about Nadal and Djokovic, I still think they've got some way to go. At least there's still the potential for them both to win more slams. So it is difficult to see how it's going to end up between those two. And given that I do think they'll probably both win more, it is probably going to be hard to make a statistical argument maybe for Federer as the greatest. But I mean, still with him being within touching distance, I think, yeah, what we've seen as we've gone through some of these numbers and what he was like as a player, as we've talked about, he's still in the conversation. I think he has to be. So yeah, it's difficult to see how it's going to end, but it's been an incredible career. Being the one who's gone first to win 20 slams, yeah, it's an incredible achievement. However it ends up, whatever order people kind of want to rank the three of them in, it's without doubt they are the top three for me, and I think Federer was a huge part of that.
So the eagle-eyed amongst you, well, you don't probably need to be that eagle-eyed to notice where we've come back very different on a different day. I think we needed that little cool off after summing up Roger Federer to come on now to go in more depth about the retirement of Serena Williams. Now, you know what? There's little bits of wording from her. I think when Federer announced his retirement, she said something like, there was a story where it was worded something like, it won't be the same on tour or something, or I'll miss seeing you on tour. And it's like, well, you're not supposed to be on tour anymore. From what we know and from what we've said, has Serena Williams definitely retired, Ewan?
Yeah, I mean, I think she has from what from what she said previously and from what we saw at the US Open with the ceremony, the send off she had. It did seem like that was likely to be the last match she would play, likely to be the last tournament. But like you said, I don't think she's completely closed the door on it. Like you said, with little things like that statement you mentioned, maybe it's just the wording of it, and maybe we're just reading into it that she might be not quite done yet. But yeah, even at the US Open, there was still some suggestions that she didn't completely rule out the prospect of playing again in the future. But yeah, I think we'd have to say it is unlikely at this stage, but not impossible. So we'll see. And certainly would not complain if we do see Serena on court again at some point in the future.
I suppose we should approach this as if she has retired in that case, which she has. I mean, that is the main statement, she's retired, and there is just these little kind of things that we're clinging on to. So Serena Williams, to what extent is she to women's tennis what Roger Federer was to men's tennis, or do you see them as very different?
I do see a lot of similarities in that sense, with obviously them being the same age, with them kind of arriving at a similar time. Well, and, okay, although the same age, we did see Serena really emerge as a force at the top of the game a bit earlier than Federer. Obviously, we saw with Serena he played her first pro match in the 1995 in a WTA qualifying event. So if you take it from that point to a final match, as I believe it is this year, I mean, a 27-year career in that sense, which is incredible, and obviously winning a first slam in 1999. So an incredibly long career, but yeah, it has been a career which has been alongside Federer's for the most part. And yeah, I think what they've both done for tennis as a whole, with them, it's been great, incredible to have two champions like that on both the men's and the women's side at the same time, the same age, who've both got great cases as being one of, if not the greatest men's and women's player of all time, respectively. So yeah, I do think there's definitely some similarities.
And I hate this, but I probably sound a little bit less downbeat today than I did in the earlier in this podcast, which was actually recorded the day before. It's pretty much I've had more time for it to sink in, basically. You know, everything I said about Roger and the way that he's synonymous with tennis is the first thing you think about when you think tennis. Well, probably for a lot of time, even above Nadal and Djokovic, if you thought of the game of tennis, and if you approached anyone else, you know, casuals, people who, you know, they're aware of the sport, but you know, they're not fans of the sport, and asked them to name a tennis player, they'd probably name Roger Federer first, and if they didn't name Roger, it'd probably actually be Serena over Djokovic or Nadal. Like she was a massive star. She was a big figurehead for the game. She still is a big figurehead for the game, and the way she's drove on the women's game. I mean, how do you actually see that? Do you see Serena as kind of revolutionising the women's game to an extent with a style of play?
Yeah, I think that definitely has been the case. I think with just with the power, the athleticism, but also the mental toughness she had. I think there's so many elements that she brought, which took the women's game to new levels. Certainly, she was a huge part of that. There were definitely other players, some of her rivals, some of the players we saw in the late '90s, and then going on throughout her entire career. There's definitely been a lot of fantastic players throughout her career that she's been up against, but she's been the leading women's player for the last 25 years, and which alongside you've got to say Venus Williams being her older sister, being that little bit ahead of her in terms of when, although they both really arrived at a similar time. I think they both took the game to new levels in many ways on the women's side. Serena obviously being the leader of that, with her achievements being even more incredible than Venus's, which on their own are up there as rightly an all-time great of the women's game.
And you've mentioned some of those achievements of both Serena and Venus, and I suppose we should talk about Venus a little bit because, well, she hasn't retired yet. She's definitely in the later stages of her career, and she's an important factor, I suppose, an important consideration when you consider Serena's career. The older sister, almost a rite of passage for Serena. Serena, when she wanted to become the world number one, to start winning slams, she had to, in a lot of finals, try and beat her sister to do that. And then obviously the doubles career that they shared together, obviously, as time went on and they started to focus more on just picking up as many singles as they could, they started to play less and less doubles together. The early career, when they're still, young 20s, when you're that age feeling like you kind of take on the world and do as much running as you want, they played a lot of tournaments in doubles together and won a lot of titles together in doubles as well. So I suppose it's a unique aspect to Serena when you compare her to the big three in the men's, in that she has this long list of doubles achievements as singles achievements. So, I mean, just looking at her career as a whole, I know Margaret Court's pure numbers, and also in doubles as well as singles, are better than Serena's, but is Serena the undisputed GOAT in women's tennis? Do you see an argument for anyone else?
Well, I think you can make an argument, but if I was going to make an argument for another player, for me it wouldn't be Margaret Court. It would possibly be Steffi Graf. But with that in mind, I do consider Serena the GOAT of women's tennis. I would say that. I would say undisputed. I wouldn't say anyone's wrong. He says that, but I do think it is maybe close, you could say, between Serena and Steffi Graf. Just on Margaret Court, as you say, it does have the all-time record of 24 singles majors, which is an incredible achievement. But I think you do have to take into account that 11 of them were at the Australian Open, which at the time wasn't really on par with the other three Grand Slams, and 13 of her slams did come before the Open era, where I think there's definitely a case that the level of competition wasn't as strong with with a lot of the great players being unable to play at the slams. But and also just the general level at the Australian Open, you'd say, then yeah, there was less rounds, the competition, not all the best players were there. So I think that has to be taken into account with Court, who is, an all-time great. There's no doubt about it. Did win the calendar slam in 1970, but yeah, I would despite Serena having one major less, I think I'd definitely have Serena ahead of Court, and Graf would be for me the closest, given that what she did, in what you'd say was a stronger era where some of the rivals she was up against, Monica Seles, unfortunately not for as long as she should have been, given the tragic incident with her being stabbed on court early in her career. But yeah, with Graf, one slam fewer than Serena on 22 and doing the Golden Slam in 1988. I mean, just one of the most incredible achievements in tennis as a single season, I think. So for me, she's up there, but I would have Serena at the top of the mountain as far as women's tennis is concerned.
And I think I definitely agree with you on that one. To me, just the way she played the game, it's obviously Iga's a fantastic talent, but we can't really compare yet. She played, with this incredible power, but also her court coverage, especially in the younger days, her ability at the net, her ability on the serve, just an all-court player, a fantastic player. And as I mentioned earlier, she is a name that transcended the sport. She became pretty much as famous as the sport that made her famous. And looking at that achievement, especially from her beginnings, now I know it's being covered now in the film King Richard, which I've got to admit I haven't seen yet. I've heard it's very good. But the story of Serena and Venus and where they came from to get to, where Serena has, where she's a name that transcends the sport, and to where Venus has as, probably one of the greatest players of all time outside of her sister, who, obviously surpassed her, but Venus's career was incredible in itself. I mean, how important do you think the Williams sisters' story is for tennis? And you look at players like Frances Tiafoe now, the beginnings he came from, his dad a janitor at a tennis centre. Frances pretty much lived at a tennis centre, apparently. How important is it that we have got these characters in tennis?
Yeah, it's incredibly important, and as you say, with the likes of Tiafoe and really other players from a background that haven't historically had the opportunities, or for whatever reason just have been unable to really play tennis or certainly reach the top of the game. And I think Serena and Venus Williams are right up there with Arthur Ashe, Althea Gibson, you'd say, in terms of black players who've had incredible success in the sport, and in terms of just pure achievements, the Williams sisters and Serena in particular have stand alone really in that regard in terms of what they've done for the game and in that sense, and just the visibility of them being at the top, given, as you say, the likes of Tiafoe, other players, other black players, and players really of all backgrounds, the belief that it's after seeing someone do it that that's like them, that they can look up to, that they can do it as well, which hasn't been the case, particularly wasn't the case for much of tennis history. So of course incredibly important in that regard.
And just more on a career in general, we talked a lot about Federer with some iconic matches. I think we may have actually talked a little bit of Serena's iconic matches in the US Open podcast, but I don't know. Once again, there's just too much to choose from here to cover probably as much as we want to. So I might ask you for one. What is your favourite, your best Serena Williams match?
Yeah, I mean, so many incredible ones to pick from, but it's interesting when you're looking in terms of Grand Slam finals that so many she won pretty convincingly, quite a lot of straight sets wins or a quite dominant third set scoreline. But one which probably stands out to me as a great match would be the semi-final of the 2005 Australian Open, where she beat Maria Sharapova 8-6 in the third set. to saving match points, still at an early stage in their rivalry, which at that stage looked like it was going to be a close and competitive rivalry. Sharapova probably at her best there, you'd say, really at that early stage of her career. And yeah, that's a match, obviously not one I watched at the time, but one I've since gone back and seen. And yeah, it was a really incredible match in terms of the level, the drama that we saw there with, as I mentioned, with Serena deep in that third set, saving match points and turn it around to win after also, you know, being close to defeat in the second set. That was that was a huge win for a fantastic match, probably just one which really stands out for me among many. We've seen that there's been a number of victories like that for her where she's had her back against the wall and she's been able to come through. I mean, I think the only player to win 3 Grand Slam titles after saving a match point, which I think is just a testament to her resilience, her mental toughness, the defiance she has in those moments. It's pretty much unparalleled, I would say, and probably in the history of the women's game, and right up there with anything in tennis history. I think she did go on to win that title, beating Lindsay Davenport in the final. And in what was that, you know, the mid 2000s was a bit more of a difficult period for Serena after, you know, some incredible heights she hit in the earlier 2000s, where she won all 4 majors in a row from 2002 into 2003, doing the Serena Slam, as it was called, which, you know, effectively like the non-calendar Grand Slam, you know, winning 4 in a row. It's almost as impressive as doing it all in one year. So, but had a bit more of a difficult period. So that at the time was a big win for her, and really did start to turn the rivalry with Sharapova, which obviously she finished with a 20-2 lead, which, I mean, just an incredible scoreline there, really, for a player who's, you'd say, one of the main rivals during the latter part of her career.
I think for me, and I went a bit outside the box with my Federer answer as well, so I'll go outside the box with my Serena answer. I'll actually go for the 2017 Australian Open. What is it? Was 2 months pregnant or something ridiculous like that? She played that final against her sister, a Williams sister final, and I think that's another significant thing because we had, you know, a lot of Serena. Well, we had a lot of Williams sister finals in the early 2000s, but I think we'd seen less of it over the previous few years. But Venus actually had a massive resurgence, I think, in 2017, starting with the Australian Open, and it was just great to see that after so many years, and you know, the way they both handled it. I think it must be the most difficult thing ever, that you're playing against your sibling, the person you've grown up with, probably your best friend in the entire world, considering how much you've shared with them. And you're competing to take the biggest things, the biggest titles off each other. But I think, you know, the way that they've always handled that has been incredible, and it was incredible in that final as well. I think, you know, the speeches and the trophy ceremony were just really quite touching. So that does stick out to me, and it might also be a recency thing as well. But I mean, I suppose covering the same points as we did with Roger Federer, we've talked a bit about Serena's playing style, the way that her and her sister as well helped revolutionise the women's game, change the game for women. What exactly, how would you sum up Serena's playing style, and you know, what is it about her game that made her almost unbeatable on the women's tour for quite a while?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there was so much that made it, you know, the greatest game of all time. I think, as we would say, you know, with us considering her the greatest player of all time, and to use the word again, which we used to describe Federer's game of complete. I think it's a word you can describe the game of many of the great champions, but, you know, for different reasons. I mean, you know, an ultra aggressive player, you would say, with probably the greatest serve in the history of the women's game, both in terms of power and precision. You know, but a great second serve. I mean, the power she had from both sides of the baseline, not just the forehand, but the backhand, which, you know, you put both of her ground strokes really right up there as, again, being all-time great shots. Strong at the net. We know, as you touched on, the success she had in doubles. That's definitely an option that translated into a singles game, which no doubt was helped from the success she had on the doubles court and the time she spent out there. I mean, so you just look through it and there's no real weaknesses, and that's the aggressive side, which was, you know, a style and a biggest strengths. But you also look at what an incredible athlete she was, the incredible ability she did have to defend when she needed it, how fast she was moving around the court, particularly in a prime, just what a powerful mover she was. Yeah, there's again no real weaknesses there when you look in from a technical point of view, from a physical point of view, and the mental strength with which I touched on was, you know, just another aspect which made her so difficult to beat. Particularly when if she didn't have her best tennis, she was still so difficult to beat because of the aura she had and the refusal to give up, the refusal to lose. Just without doubt, one of the fiercest competitors we've seen in tennis.
For me, I know I've probably made this point. Well, I know I've made this point twice already, but I think, and this is going to sound terrible, but definitely as a woman to have reached the level of icon that she did in tennis. And I know tennis has always been, it's not been perfect for gender equality, but it's in terms of the gap in crowds and the gap in pay, it's been a lot smaller than a lot of other sports, and the level of stardom that women's players can reach has always been a little bit closer to the men in tennis than it is for a lot of other big sports as well. So, you know, it's tennis hasn't you know, got to the point of perfect parity in terms of gender equality, but it's a lot closer. But still, you'd expect the biggest stars still to be the men, and to have reached a level where she is essentially as synonymous with the game as the other great champion that's announced his retirement, Roger Federer, that we've already covered. I think it really does stand out to me, and it can only be a really inspiring thing to all the women out there. I think pretty much if you ask any of the younger talents on the women's tour right now, you know, they may have their other heroes. We know Iga Swiatek looks up massively to Rafael Nadal, actually, but I'm sure Iga would cite Serena still as a big inspiration, and a lot of others as well. So I think that pretty much sums up my thoughts on Serena Williams. Just the greatest of all time in the women's game. You know, a really important figurehead, actually, an important figurehead for tennis, and one that will be missed just as much as Federer's missed. I don't know if there's any final points you want to get off your chest about another fantastic career coming to an end.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a few more just in terms of the incredible numbers and the stats. Obviously, we could go on forever in this regard, and in all regards, really, about Serena and her career, and as you rightly say, what she's done for the game, how important she's been, and the people she's inspired. But in terms of some of the achievements that stand out, obviously, the 23 Grand Slam singles titles, but I mean, 14 in women's doubles, 319 weeks as world number one, 5-time year-end number one, and 5-time winner of the WTA finals. Just the dominance you had, particularly at her best, was pretty staggering. An Olympic gold medalist in both singles and doubles, which again just shows what an incredible player she was in both formats of the game. And 23 WTA 1000 titles, formerly known as at the Premier level. I mean, there's just so many incredible achievements when you look at that. The Serena Slam, which we mentioned earlier, and probably to highlight another thing about the longevity would be a great point to finish on. The two best seasons of her career, really, for me, would be 2002 and 2015. They were the two seasons where she won 3 out of the 4 slams. And, I mean, with them being 13 years apart, it just shows that it's hard to actually pinpoint what you'd consider Serena's prime. She almost had an early career prime and a late career prime, which is incredible. You've just seen that from there's no one else really like that. Maybe a little bit like Federer having the resurgence in 2017, as we touched on previously. But with this, it was different because it was a genuine period of dominance that she enjoyed, really, in the early to mid 2010s. So, and the final one would just be winning a first slam in 1999 and the last one in 2017. I mean, almost an 18-year gap between a first and last slam. I mean, if that doesn't say longevity, I mean, I don't know what does. It's a remarkable career.
And this is a problem we had with Federer as well. They've been around so long, it felt like they'd be around forever. And now that both of them have retired within weeks of each other, it kind of hits you about the passage of time and your own sort of mortality as well. You know, for me, like I think I mentioned it earlier, it's like watching my childhood disappear from me. Realistically, my childhood disappeared from me a long time ago. I am a fully grown adult man, but you know, it really just does hammer it home, the passage of time. Seeing these names that have, you know, they've been in my head that I've known about for pretty much my entire life, and seeing them finally call time on the careers. But I think my final thing is to just say thank you to them both for, and I know they're not watching, but thank you for the entertainment, for what they've given us, for what they've given this sport that we both love. We love so much. We come on here and talk about it for an hour at a time. So yeah, we will be back again soon, I suppose I should say, to cover a nicer topic than the retirement of two all-time greats. So watch out for that. I think there might be a little roundup of action that's gone on recently or other news talking points. We haven't actually ironed in the date yet, but we look forward to talking something more positive, talking just pure action rather than, like I say, quite a somber topic. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.